Hi, my name is Keely Bateman, and I am going to interview Sonja Sellers, and she is going to share her testimony with me and her favorite hymn and her favorite verse. Sonja, will you tell me how you came to know the Lord?
I was raised in a Pentecostal church, and in a Pentecostal church, you get a lot of pushing and shoving to go to know the Lord. But my actual time when I came to know the Lord, when I was 16, and the pastor was preaching on giving your life to Jesus. So I went forward in the church and I was baptized in that church. But there was always kind of a hesitation about why did I
Mhm.
really do that? Because it was a confusion between what I was raised in and what the Baptist church was all about. So it was a confusion. So one night I was listening to Billy Graham. Well, I was an adult by then, 18, if I could consider an adult. And I was listening to Billy Graham and he said, if you haven't made this decision, now's the time. So I said, Lord, if I've never done this and said this out loud, now is the time. And it was just a different feeling, a different thing. And it's been that way for years now. So that's basically when he was at the Anaheim Stadium in Los Angeles, or Orange County. Yeah. And I was watching it on television. And then a few minutes later, my dad came home and he was drunk. It was very good experience and bad at the same time. So it was just to make, to know who I am. I'm the oldest of 7 children.
Okay.
Okay. And my dad was a severe alcoholic and he was very mean to my mom. He would hit her. And I remember saying to her when I was 16 years old, I said, when I grow up, a little girl, I said to her, when I grow up, I will not live like you. And she said, oh, honey, all men are the same. You'll learn all men are just alike. I said, no, I don't believe that. And so that's where we were. And that's where I am now.
Mm.
So, but to go farther in my testimony, when I was 16 years old, I went to a American Baptist Church in Bellflower. That's where I saw my husband, the man who became my husband later. He was in a quartet. And, but I went there with another guy that I was going with, thought I was going to marry him. But at 16, what do you know? You don't know anything. at 16. So, but anyway, I met him there at that church. And then I became very active in that church because I went to school there. But I went to school in a Pentecostal church. Well, I went to church at a Pentecostal church. And if you've never been in a Pentecostal church, everything in the world that you do is a sin. It's a sin. Everything is a sin. You go to the movie is a sin. Dancing is a sin. Wearing a bathing suit is a sin. And you're constantly having to pray over, I'm sorry, Lord, what did I do this time? Basically. And so that was very difficult for me to go from that into a Baptist environment. But my husband was in seminary. He was going to Baptist seminary to be a pastor. And so we were married for 64 years. But my sisters and brothers would tattle on me. They'd go tell my grandma, Grandma, Sonia went to a movie. Sonia went to this. Sonia went to that. I was in trouble all the time, all the time. But at 16 years old, I decided that I'd had enough of my father's drinking and the constant fighting and the physical abuse to my mother that I ran away. Well, literally, physically ran away. And in my running away, I took a car, my dad's car, and went to a place where they had a telephone booth. They don't have those anymore, but a real telephone booth. And I called the First Baptist Church of Bellflower. And the youth pastor there, I told him, his name was Dennis Price. I said, I ran away from home. I don't have a place to go. And he said, well, then you better come here. So I went to the church. And in the meantime, he had called his mother, who had a room in her home that she kept open for missionaries.
Okay.
And so they made arrangements for me to stay with her until I could get settled elsewhere. And my parents were looking for me, but they couldn't find me. They thought that Henry, who was my husband later on in life, had put me up to running away, but that was absolutely untrue. So anyway, I went to the Bellflower First Baptist Church, and they would have people in the church, ladies who were maybe seniors, a lady called Grandma Long who let me stay with her for a while, and then another lady that had a room in her home that let me stay with her. And then my father would find me, and he'd come and get me and literally physically drag me out of the house.
Wow.
And so that was the last time I ran away. But I just knew that life had to be different for me. It wasn't going to be like
Yeah.
that. So um, I'm trying to remember what all I have in this thing. But it was just then when Henry and I started dating, I was 16.
Okay.
I was still in high school, and he was in seminary. And he had come home and told his parents from camp one year when he was out of high school that God called him into the ministry.
Mm.
Well, I'm 16 years old and I'm going to marry a preacher. Oh Lord, that's different. It was quite a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we were married 4 years later,
Okay.
and we have served in so many churches. I'm going to look at the paper. When we first got married, he was in a church in San Pedro, but we went from there to a church in Linwood. From Linwood, we went to Compton Emmanuel Baptist Church, and there's a thing that within the American Baptist Church is that if the pastor dies, the staff has to leave. So the staff we had to leave our position or his position and go somewhere. So he got a calling to a church in El Centro. So we went to El Centro. We were there for 4 years, and then we had our son was born there. And then we came back to a church in Maywood, California, where we were there 19 and a half years.
Oh.
And the youth pastor, he was a youth pastor,
Mhm.
Christian education director, choir director,
Oh, wow.
all at the same time. And we have had in our home hundreds of kids at a time.
Mm.
Just because they believed in sings after church every Sunday night. So you went to somebody's home, and our house was just packed with teenagers. So I'm just not. I don't know where to go from here. But Henry's. We were a youth pastor, associate pastor, choir director, Christian education director, and then he became a pastor.
Okay.
So at the Tustin First Baptist Church of Tustin, we were there for 22 and a half years. And while we were there, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Mm.
So Parkinson's disease was a nasty thing to add to our lives. And he was very ill.
Yeah.
So he had to retire due to his illness. So he became so ill that the last few years of our life was just, he was sick, taking care of it. And then we were here in Emmett at the Baptist church here in town.
Okay.
And we weren't on staff or anything. We were just there.
Mhm.
And so we spent the last part of his life here in Emmett.
Oh, okay.
And then he passed away in October 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years this October. So, but I just had decided that, at a very young age, that I was not going to live like my parents.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Alcoholic parent is just tough. It's abusive.
Mhm.
So I ran away from home. And they kept saying, "You're going to come back." I said, "I'm not coming back." So they go from a severe alcoholic environment
Mhm.
to being a pastor's wife is quite a switch. And my folks were always moving, because I'd come home from school and they'd be moving again. And it was constant. We traveled most of my life as a child in a car, living in a car. And if you've ever seen the movie Grapes of Wrath, I think that's my family. But it was just very, very difficult, very hard.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't change the last part of my life for anything.
Yeah.
It was quite an experience. So that's where I am today.
What is your favorite hymn and why?
Well, one of my favorite hymns is "It Is Well With My Soul." And I believe that. When you're a Christian, it is well with my soul. I had the privilege of singing this at my husband's funeral,
Mm.
and I told my kids, "If they don't have somebody singing it at mine, I will record it, and they can play it." They think that's pretty funny, and they said, "Mom," but I do think it's funny. It's a beautiful hymn,
Mhm.
and it speaks of assurance.
Mm.
It speaks of knowing that when you die, it is well with my soul.
Mhm.
Other than feeling like, well, is it? Is this true? Is this a fact? Are we going to go to heaven?
Mhm.
And knowing full well that it is well with my soul when we're gone. And that way it leaves a message, in my opinion, for my family or our families
Mhm.
that what we've lived with, the song that we love, means something. And that's the reason it means that to me.
Yeah.
And then I have a second favorite song.
Oh, okay.
It's called Amazing Grace. And I had the privilege of singing in a cantata this past Easter with a friend who is a director. And it was in modern day English. The wording was just you and I talking to each other
Mhm.
rather than like King James
Yeah.
scriptures.
Yeah.
But to me, it was so sweet. But then when they came to the part where it says when Jesus is on a cross, the thief turns to him and said, "Why are you here? You've done nothing wrong."
Mhm.
And Jesus just turns to him and says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Is that not a total assurance of what it's all about?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we spent our life hoping for something that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
But Jesus said, "Today, immediately, nothing that you did before, or you've got to do 10 steps here and 5 steps back or
Mhm.
whatever to make your way, it isn't there. It's immediate."
Yeah.
And that's why that song's so important to me.
What is your favorite, verse?
Well, I don't have a lot of memory verses tucked away, but what I do like is the one that's Ephesians 3:20. He is abundantly able to do all things, even though even those we think we cannot do.
Mhm.
Again, that to me is very personal because I believe that my purpose, my calling was to be a husband and be a husband, be my husband's helpmate because he was, as I said, he was very ill,
Mhm.
ill in the past few years, and I have my responsibility was to put him in his wheelchair, put him in the car, take him out of the car, put him in his wheelchair, take him into church, put him in a pew, take him to the doctor, do all of these things,
Mm.
and yet we had a good time.
Mm.
We had a great time even in his last waning moments. We had a great time. He fired me one day. He fired me as his wife, and I said, "Well, that's good. Then I don't have to take care of you anymore." But we had a great relationship, 64 years, and that's a long time.
Mhm.
And I'd do it all again.
Yeah.
I would do it all over, start again, and do it all over if I had to. And that's probably a good thing. But yeah, it was an experience.